Welcome to Chess Collab, and thank you so much for joining. Last time we looked at the different sections of the chessboard. Now, today we are going to dive into the actual naming of the chess pieces, and also we are going to just to have a look at abbreviations associated with the chess pieces, and also not forgetting the actual piece value of each piece. This is what we are going to cover. And by the end of this lesson, you should be able to match the actual piece to its value, and also to match the actual piece in association to the moves which you are going to look at, courtesy of what we call algebraic notation. Let's just move on right away. Right, we're going to start with the piece and their values. Whenever you're talking in terms of the value, we're looking at the points. How many points are allocated? For example, if you're looking at the queen, we're looking at 9 points. And remember, last time I also told you that the queen is the most powerful on the chessboard. We're going to look at that as we progress, as we are going to handle only the queen alone, so that you will be able to understand it better. We're looking at the rook. The rook have got 5 points. 5 points are allocated. Then we look at the bishop. The bishop have got 3 points allocated. Same applies with the knight. The knight, we also have 3 points allocated for it as a piece. We also look at the pawn. A pawn is only worth 1 point. In chess, we also what we have trading. We're going to look at trading as we go on once we start playing the actual game. If the king is trapped, you lose the game. So we do not allocate any value to the king. Other grandmasters describe that as they are priceless. Right, let's just move on to the naming the squares algebraic notation. So this will help us to be able to write down the moves as you make a move on the chessboard. And as time goes on, you are also going to introduce the clock. So whenever you're writing down the names of the squares, we start with the first letter and small letters to be more specific. We start with the letter, then we dive into the number. We're going to see as I'm going to present the chessboard. As you can see, initially I recommended that you must have a lettered and a numbered chessboard to facilitate the actual writing down of the moves, courtesy of algebraic notation. Where I have just placed the star there, first of all, you have to name the letter. If you have already said D, yes, you are correct, because whenever you are now indicating in terms of that letter, you are just saying D, and you name the number, which is 4. So in other words, that square where the star is D4. Then we move on. Next, number 1 star. That's if you have already said E7, well done, great job. We move on. Star 2 is F6. Then star 3 is H6. Then we move on to star number 4. Star number 4 is B5. Then star number 5 is A7. Star number, where is star number 6? Waiting for it to appear. Star number 6 is B6. Then we move on to star number 7. Still waiting for it to come. B4. If you've already said that, correct. C8, star number 8. Star number 8 is C3, I mean to say there. Then star number 9 is F3. Then we move on to star number 9, which is F3, as I've already indicated. So I'm just going to leave all the other squares so that you can also practice. So because remember, as you practice, That's how you learn, right? And also, I just want to mention that whenever you are naming the squares, remember we use a small letter, especially if it is a pawn move. So what we were talking about right now, we were describing the pawn moves. So whenever you say C3, that means you have moved the pawn to C3, right? Then pawns are not indicated by their first letter, but are recognized by the absence of such a letter. You're going to see as we progress, as we do the actual game, as we notate them right here. Right, let's move on. Let's look at abbreviations in chess. First letter, a capital letter of its name. That's what you have to do. For example, the king, we just only use capital letter K. So whenever you say K, E4, that means you've moved the king to E4. Now we are associating it with the previous squares which we've already named. But we're going to look at them as we progress. Right, that's the king for you. Then the queen, we use capital letter Q. Then for the rook, we use capital letter R. Then for bishop, we use capital letter B. Then also for the knight, we use capital letter N. That's why previously I emphasized that. I was underlining the letter N so that you will be able to associate it with the conversation. We use N for knight and K for king to avoid confusion in chess, because the knight also starts with the letter K. And also remember, for promotion of a pawn, the actual pawn move is indicated, followed by the abbreviation of the new piece. That means you're going to see as we progress, we're going to talk about the special move. And in this case, we're looking at the promotion of a pawn as a special move in this case. So in other words, promotion means when the pawn reaches the end right at the top. In other words, from its initial position, moving slowly across the chessboard to the end, it changes to another piece. It can be a knight, it can be a bishop, it can be a queen, it can also be a rook, but it cannot be a king. I emphasize, it cannot be a king. So please take note of that. So in other words, for example, if a pawn was within the file in D file, that means if it reaches the end, it will be on D8. And if you want to promote it to become a queen, then that's when it becomes a queen. Capital letter Q, that's what you have to write. So when it takes and it becomes F8 there, it becomes a knight. If you want it to be a knight. If you want to be a bishop, that's how you write it. If you want to be a rook, if it's on G, that becomes a rook. So, and so on, and so on. So as we go on, you'll be able to see. When you capture, we use capital letter X to represent that you have captured. For example, in this case, if there was a pawn on F, that means F takes B5. That means maybe it have already captured any piece which will be on B5. And remember, in chess, we do not capture the king. We only attack the king. So you are on a right to learn more in terms of that. So let's just move on to the abbreviations, including special moves. Now, in chess, we do have special moves, which we are going to look at as it is a lesson on its own. So let's move on. Whenever you see 0-0, if let's say you have picked up a notating pad of someone else who once have been playing and they have already completed their game, then you see 0-0. That means it's castling is a special move in chess where the rook on H1 or a rook on H8, they can do what we call kingside castling. So remember, whenever we're talking chess, we're talking for both light and dark. So remember, I told you it's an army between the light and the dark. Right. So different teams and different, I can say, agenda in terms of winning. Right. Then we also have what we call long castling. So whenever you are writing the long castling, you have to put 0-0-0. Already, you've got 3 zeros. That means it's a long castling. And we normally describe it as a queen side castling, which is quite a long one indeed. We're going to dive more on castling. How do we do it on the chessboard at a later stage? X, as I've already indicated, indicates that you have captured a certain piece on the chessboard and it's already been removed from the chessboard. When you capture, you remove. When you attack on the chessboard, the piece will remain there. Right? Let's move on. Then when we have two plus signs, that means it's checkmate. Remember, checkmate means the game is over. The king have been trapped. If you trap the king, you don't remove the king from the chessboard. You just finish the game while the king is on the chessboard. We also use a hashtag to represent checkmate. Then we have in passant. In passant is a borrowed English word, which is now, it has been borrowed. The other letters have been borrowed from French, in passant, which means capturing in a special way. And it is a pawn move. Right, we're going to dive into that at a later stage. Right, that's all I wanted to cover with you in this lesson. And please remember to subscribe and so that we can notify you once we have created yet another lesson. Thank you very much.